episode, we talk about some toys that may have a bone to pick about being forgotten. So, stick around. Hello, fellow dorks and dorkettes. My name is Rob, and welcome to Plastic Ghosts. This is the show where we talk about forgotten toys and the ghosts that they've left behind. In this episode, we will be talking about 80s skeleton toys. More specifically, action figures that had skeletal features or were skeletons themselves. Now, usually we talk about a forgotten toy line, but this time we will be talking about specific figures and hopefully glean a little bit of info about the characters that these figures were. Now, the thing about the whole forgotten toys thing is there is a very, very small footprint online left by some of these great toys. And that's what's sad about it. They have been lost and they remain in a lot of people's memories. Well, some people's memories. Like I've always said, every toy line at least has one fan out there. Someone that remembers it fondly from when they were a kid. Now, of course, these toy lines did not branch off into the big franchises of some of the ones that are well remembered and well loved today. But that doesn't mean they were bad toys. No, not at all. A lot of times these were great toys that just didn't have that je ne sais quoi that the other lines did, or financial backing. But anyway, without further ado, let's go to number one, and that is Charon from the Clash of the Titans toy line. Based on the movie, Clash of the Titans was released in 1980 by Mattel. And yeah, a lot of toy franchises based on movies got lost in the sauce because of the most powerful one of them all, Star Wars. Now, Clash of the Titans, to me, is one of the best movies ever. Hands down, love it to this day, still watch it very fondly. I mean, it's a Ray Harryhausen movie, so you cannot go wrong. Anyway, the character of Charon was just like the mythical version. He was a ferryman, and he transported Perseus and his men across the river Styx, we'll say, to Medusa's lair. And we know how great that battle was with Medusa. Now, Charon didn't really have that big of a part in the movie, but he had a lasting impression, definitely on me, because it creeped me out so much. I mean, in 1980, I was 4 years old, and I remember seeing this movie in the theater when it came out. That is how much of an impact it had on me, that I can remember it at 4 years old. But Charon really creeped me out. Most of his details were shrouded by his huge hood, and you saw his skeletal hand take the 2 coins from Perseus in order to cross. Now, the toy itself is pretty awesome. Now, there were a lot of characters in the movie that they probably could have made figures of, and they probably would have been boring, because a lot of them would have been the different soldiers and stuff. Or maybe some of Calibus's henchmen. They were pretty gnarly looking. But anyway, it's a pretty big honor to have such a big character in toy form. And it looks great. Everything from the packaging to the toy itself just screamed awesomeness. Now, granted, the Clash of the Titans line did not have much posability, just like Star Wars toys at the time. But they really nailed it with his robe and how you could put him in a sitting position. It's very reminiscent of the Emperor figure that we saw from Kenner later on in the 80s. But this one kind of nailed the whole robe thing from the get-go. Now, I could go on and on about how great the toys were and how great the movie was, but unfortunately we need to save some time for more people on this list. So, let's get to number 2. Number 2 is the character Robash from the Invasibles. Released by Galoob in 1984, the Invasibles were a cool figure that had a really neat gimmick. Now, their face spun around, a la like Manny faces from the Masters of the Universe line. Except these characters took on a different persona to battle good or evil, depending on the situation. Now, Robash was a character of good, and like his name suggests, he is actually robotic in nature. So it's kind of weird that he has a straight up human skull head. And you can really see that on the packaging for the toy. Now, the figure does have kind of a robotic structure to the skull, but if you look at the toy packaging, that's a straight up skull and a straight up picture that you would see on a metal album at the time. Now, Robash, like the name suggests, loves to bash evil. And the reason he had a skull face was to strike fear into the hearts of evildoers. So it makes sense, but yeah, still a robot with a human skull, that's pretty awesome, but just kind of weird at the same time. Nowadays, Invasibles kind of has a cult following in the toy collecting community, but all in all, it is a forgotten toy line, and it's a travesty because it was pretty neat. Now, I unfortunately did not have any of the Invasibles, but I can remember seeing them on the store shelves, seeing the commercials, and really wanting them. Now would have been the part where I said, commercials, let's look at one. But sadly, even those have been lost to time. Number 3 on the list comes from a personal favorite toy line of mine from the 1980s, and that is the Ninja toy line. Sometimes known as Ninja Assassins or Ninja Heroes, I believe. The Ninja toy line was released by Select Merchandise in 1985. Now, the character that we will be talking about is Reaper. In the past, I've mentioned the werewolf figure, who is, top-notch, one of my favorite toy memories of all time. Now, Reaper is one that I really wanted as a kid, but was never able to find it on the store shelves, because it's a no-brainer. A ninja with a skull, you can't go wrong with that. And what was super awesome about the Ninja toy line was they all came with cloth goods on top of having some awesome ninja accessories. Now, the cloth goods, they came with a gi and a mask. Now, Reaper's gi, purple, comes with a skull right on his chest. So if he has his mask on, you still know what is up. Anyway, the one thing about the characters, if you want to collect them later on, is a lot of them don't come with their cloth goods. And it's kind of a bummer. Now, Reaper, you really don't need to find one with all of his accessories or cloth goods, because he looked great even without it, because his chest had a, human muscular type of coloring and texture going on that just looks super gross and creepy. Either Slim Goodbody or from Hellraiser, your pick. Anyway, super awesome figure. Like I said, you can't go wrong with a ninja with a skull head. And this toy just, the imagination of the characters in this toy line really made up for the toy line's shortcomings, as in not being very poseable, being kind of clunky, but they did have an action feature where they would chop, so they had that going for it. Anyway, like I said, Reaper, a great skeleton figure that has been lost to time. Now, number 4 comes from a toy line that I had no idea existed when I was a kid, and I was lucky enough to stumble upon it doing research for Plastic Ghosts. Now, quick little backstory on my researching, if you will. I have compiled a list of hundreds of forgotten toys from the 80s, and that might be an exaggeration to say hundreds, but it's pretty close. Anyway, this is one of these shining examples of envy of people that remember this toy line. And before we get any further, let me say what the toy line is, and that is Cosmic Cowboys. Now, this He-Man-esque toy line was released by Akamus Toys in 1983. Now, Cosmic Cowboys is pretty much as the name says. It came out before Brave Star, but kind of had the same gist to it. These are spacefaring cowboys and cohorts and all the people of that ilk. But the character that we will be talking about that is a forgotten skeleton is Iron Jaw. Now, like I said earlier, we will be discussing these toy lines in the future, but one of the little things about this toy line that I want to mention now while we talk about Iron Jaw is they were part of the Exchangers series from Akimus Toys, which means you can pop off their limbs and trade them with other characters within the toy line. Now, Iron Jaw, I don't know, I kind of get a, do you remember Lord Baller from Briscoe County? I kind of get that feeling with him, with his hat and his ornate uniform. Now, this uniform is draped in skulls, has a skull belt buckle, skull buttons, just skulled all the way up to match his awesome skull head. Now, one of the neat things is with the Cosmic Cowboy figures, and like I said, I'll get more into specifics about the toy line at a later date, but they actually had holsters and things to hold their guns. So I think that's actually a point that they get that Masters of the Universe didn't. Because sadly, this toy line, with what limited blips on the internet that I can find of it, is just deemed a ripoff, a knockoff, or bootleg. Now, I think that something this imaginative and this intricate with its accessories is much more than just a bootleg. This was something that should have gotten a lot further than it did. Like I said, this actually predated Brave Star, and that's a toy line that has a rabid following nowadays in the toy collecting universe. It's not something that is deemed forgotten because there are a ton of people online that fondly remember Brave Star. And sadly, Cosmic Cowboys should be up there when you're remembering sci-fi western toys of the 1980s. Now, Iron Jaw, I really don't have much to go on. I've found pictures of the packaging, pictures of the toy. Other than that, I don't know any backstory about the character. Now, I would assume with his skull motif, he probably was a villain, because the heroes in this line were very white bread, heroic looking characters. So I'm just going to go out on a limb and say he was the villain, and you can't go wrong with a skull-faced villain a la Masters of the Universe. Yet again, there are comparisons because of the make and design of the figures and it being space and the era that they were released in and the skull-headed villain. But this was something, like I said, that had a great imaginative design to it. And yeah, unfortunately, it should have been a lot more popular than it was. Like I said, this was a toy line I didn't even know about when I was a kid. But if I did, I would have loved it. Now we'll get to an honorable mention. And this is an actual toy line that every single character in the toy line is a skeleton. And that is Nightmare Warriors. Released by MTC in 1983, hey, that kind of rhymed. Nightmare Warriors were He-Man-esque inspired figures. Unfortunately, we see that a lot with the whole Forgotten Toys thing. They can be deemed as just a simple knockoff, bootleg, what have you. But, man, these are just companies striking while the iron is hot. I don't find any fault in that. And a lot of these toys, they would have fit perfectly within your Masters of the Universe playtime. And this is one that would have as well. Now, Nightmare Warriors are, like I said, every single character in the line was a skeleton. One of the great things about these figures, and I mean every single one of them, other than being a skeleton, they glowed in the dark. As a kid, that was a license to print money. So why didn't these become more popular than they were? I mean, again, this is a toy line I do not remember at all as a kid, but I wish I did. I would have enjoyed these figures. Now, the Nightmare Warriors were a collection of warriors throughout time. You had a Roman guy, a Pancho Villa type of Western guy. You had a pirate, you had a soldier, you had an Indian. I mean, all of the best warriors throughout the eras was represented by a skeletal figure. And yeah, I can't say it enough how great and awesome these figures looked. Now, I did not want to single out a single one of them to add it to the list. That's why it's an honorable mention, because every single one of them is a skeleton, and every single one of them is forgotten, and every single one of them was freaking awesome. And yes, I say that word awesome a lot, but I can't think of any better words to describe these great action figures. Like I said, they are based on the He-Man Masters of the Universe scale and design, and it works. I mean, like I said, a lot of people in that time period did utilize that style, and like I said before, I don't fault them for that. I would have. If I had a toy company, I'd be doing whatever I could to try to keep up with the market and produce great toys. And these and a lot of the other ones that we will see in Plastic Ghosts that utilize this style would have fit so perfectly within your playtime with your Masters of the Universe. I mean, these dudes could have been from another planet outside of Eternia somewhere, and they're coming here just to, you know, mess stuff up. And now we know Eternia has a direct branch to Earth because of Prince Adam's mom, so what if these are Earth-style soldiers? It would still work. Anyway, I could just defend the whole Masters of the Universe thing forever, and I will on many occasions in the future with Plastic Ghost. So please don't fault me, because I will never say these things are just bootlegs or knockoffs. They were something far greater, far more imaginative. I don't say more imaginative Masters of the Universe, but they had a great imaginative design and premise, and yeah, should have gone a lot further and should not be a Plastic Ghost. It should not have been forgotten. With number 5 on the list, we're going to keep the whole train a-rolling of the Masters of the Universe inspired toy lines. This time it comes from Remco in 1983, and it is the Pirates of the Galaxies. Now, I just love that name. I think that is just... But anyway, Pirates of the Galaxies is kind of what you would think. These are pirates that sailed the galaxies on their ships. And the character we will be talking about is Ribs. Now, there were 2 villains within the line, and they happen to both be skeletons. So it's kind of hard to pick which one. But I picked Ribs because I believe he may be the leader, because he has a cape. Now, the 2 skeletons are a black one and a red one. Now, Ribs is the black one, and like I said, he came with a cape and a cool, like, bandolier thing and a cutlass. I don't really think you need anything more to make a great action figure. Now, like I said, and like I've mentioned before, we'll say many more times, this toy line was inspired by Masters of the Universe. And Remco, hands down, is one of my favorite toy manufacturers from the 80s, because it was a toy line, or I should say, it was a manufacturer that produced more... They produced cheaper toys, and they were ones that I found at Kmart more regularly than anywhere else. And that was one of the things when you grew up, you know, kind of poor like I did, you went for the cheap bang for the buck. Because I couldn't always afford Masters of the Universe, but I could afford toys like this. And unfortunately, I don't remember specifically Pirates of the Galaxies, but I remember other Remco toys within this universe, if you will, and we'll talk about more of them in the future of Plastic Ghosts. But I wish I had more info to go on, but I think a lot of these things didn't have backstories or elaborate folklore behind it. They were just cool toys that were put out for the sake of capitalizing on the Masters of the Universe name and likeness. And yes, that is kind of bad, and yes, I just defended it before, and I will with my dying breath. But yeah, these were just really neat figures. And like I said with the Cosmic Cowboys, the heroes in the line, the pirates, were just very cookie cutter, white bread, human heroes. And the villains were where it was really at. I mean, like I said, there were two skeletons. Both of them represented the bad guys, and both of them were great. And like I said, there's a black one and a red one, and Ribs happened to be the black one, and just happened to be the one I chose for this list because I think maybe he was the leader. Like I said, he had a cape. That means he's a little bit more regal than the other one. Granted, I can't even remember what the other one's name was. I'm sure I'll talk about it at a later date when we discuss the whole Pirates of the Galaxies toy line in general. But for now, let's just focus on Ribs and give him the attention he deserves. And saying Ribs so many times, did you know the McRib is coming back? Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this Halloween-themed episode of Plastic Ghosts. We just looked at 5 forgotten skeleton action figures from the 1980s, and an honorable mention of a complete toy line of skeletons. And there were many more. It was very hard to make this list. I kind of zeroed it down to action figures and characters, because I was pulling stuff from everywhere. And some of them were forgotten, some of them weren't. That's what caused me to whittle it down and just go with the forgotten and add this to the Plastic Ghosts series. Anyway, skeletons and Halloween go hand in hand, just like skeletons and villains in the 1980s. Some of the most classic villains of all time happen to be skeletons, like Skeletor. One of the most the biggest shining example of an 80s villain, and there he is. He's a skeleton. Well, a weightlifter with a skull head. But anyway, like I said, Masters of the Universe really launched 1,000 ships, and it should be, applauded for that. These toy lines should not just be discarded as bootlegs or rip-offs or, just enjoy them for what they are and what they could have added to your Masters of the Universe playtime. And that's one of the things when I look back at these toy lines as an adult, I see limitless potential of the play time that I would have had with them when I was a kid. I mean, growing up, I did not have a lot of money, so I had a mishmash of different toys from different toy lines and different toy manufacturers, and I had to play with them together and create my own worlds of adventure and excitement. And my mind still goes to that to this day when I research these forgotten toy lines, these plastic ghosts, if you will. And that is one of the things that I love most about doing a show like this and doing the research, is where my mind wanders and thinking about how much fun I would have had with them. Anyway, let's get going. I hope you enjoyed this episode. If you did, please give me a thumbs up. If you got something to say, please leave a comment. I love reading them, and I love getting back to everybody. And if you're new around here and you enjoyed this or any of the episodes that YouTube is recommending down here, please hit subscribe. And if you hit that little bell icon, you will be notified whenever there's a new episode. So anyway, until next time, thanks for watching. Keep being rad and stay dorky.